Welcome to Ignite to Impact, a weekly podcast that explores what it takes to make your community, our nation, and the world a better place. You've tuned in to be inspired and enlightened as we pull back the curtain and dive into intimate and energetic conversations with achievers and doers. We are talking with leaders who are in the trenches making phenomenal changes through business, nonprofits, education, and the arts. Our goal? To encourage, motivate, and challenge you to go to the next level in leadership. Now, here's your host, Master Leadership Strategist, Dr. Geneva Williams. So, let's ignite to impact.
Well, hi there again, and welcome to Ignite to Impact, where we have conversations about making the world a better place. Well, today I'd like to talk with you, just you and me, about finding your spot in the volunteer world. As a young girl, I dreamed of being a candy striper. Now, I know I'm dating myself, but I think there's probably many of you out there who've heard of Candy Striper. I admitted that I didn't know much about what they actually did when I was a little girl. I was after the uniform. There was something about those pink and white stripes that seemed so grown up. Now, years later, when I was old enough to understand what Candy Stripers were really about, they were teenage girls volunteering in hospitals. The uniform no longer intrigued me, but volunteering did. I got involved at church and school, visiting the elderly in the afternoon. I would clean up the neighborhood on the weekend. I would tutor kindergartners. I would sell brownies, and I'd wash cars. They were activities that for me became as much a part of growing up as football games and midterm exams. Now, research says growing up volunteering as a young person, you become an adult who volunteers. So maybe that's why volunteering has become enmeshed in the fabric of my life today. I also like what Winston Churchill said. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. So what is volunteering? Now, if you go into the dictionary is going to tell you that volunteering is a person who freely offers to take part in something or to do a task or to do work without being paid. I think about it a little bit differently. I think about it as giving time and talent to help. And that could be time and talent to help, and then there's like a ... I mean, you can fill in after the help. It could be time and talent to help your neighbor, an organization in the community, a young person. It could be giving time and talent to help at a soup kitchen or with a youth group. It could be giving your time and talent to singing in the choir at your church, synagogue, or mosque. Yes, singing in the choir, wherever you sing, wherever you pray, that is your giving of your time. You're volunteering your time and your talents. So all those are volunteer activities. And when you think about it, the largest volunteer effort in this country was the civil rights movement. Those brothers and sisters, whites and blacks, old and young, folk from all walks of life came together, giving their time and their talents to make this country a better place. So, let's look at some interesting information about volunteering. Currently, 63 million Americans volunteer about 8 billion hours of their time and talent and effort to improve people's lives here in this country. With the new value of volunteer time, which is about $24 an hour, These Americans are contributing approximately $193 billion to our nation. That's a lot of money. According to data from the Corporation for National and Community Service, religious organizations were cited as the type of organizations that volunteers worked in the most, at about 35%. So that's your church, your mosque, your synagogue. And that's where people mainly volunteer in or are connected with their religious organizations in a church or in a synagogue or in the community with a church or a mosque. And this, that's the most where people volunteer, followed by education or youth service, and then social or community service organizations. So that's where you find most people who volunteer. And, you know, what's encouraging about all of that is that we're finding now that all ages of folk volunteer. So the tradition, the ethics, the spirit of volunteering is being passed down from generation to generation. And again, we know that if you do some volunteering when you're a young one, you'll usually likely grow up to do it as an adult. Now, volunteers under 24 years old account for about 23% of all volunteers. So again, it shows that young people are volunteering and they will, as they grow older, continue that tradition. So why do people volunteer? You know, I taught at the United Way Academy for Volunteerism for several years, and we used to spend a lot of time talking about motives, reasons, the why, the raison d'etre that people will volunteer. And they really do for a whole variety of reasons. For some, it's the chance to give something back to the community, or to make a difference to and for the people around them. For others, it provides the opportunity to meet new people, or to develop new skills, or to build on existing experience and knowledge. Some people also find that in some point in their lives, they believe that were it not for certain things, they would be the people who would need help, and who knows, one day may need help. So they're really helping out now as sort of that investment for the future. And another reason is that some people believe that giving back or doing good is just the thing to do. You know, in this country, it's very commonplace to hear, you know, whenever you're a youngster, that giving back and doing for others is a good thing to do. So many people do it because it's just the right thing to do, and that it's a way of doing something to make the world a better place where we can actually help our community and others. You know, someone said that volunteering is the ultimate exercise in democracy. You can vote in elections once a year, but when you volunteer, you vote every day about the kind of community you want to live in. Think about that. It's that action part. You're activating democracy. Now, another reason that people volunteer is to do something they're passionate about. So if you're a gardener or a sower, you might want to, you know, plant flowers in your neighborhood or repair clothes for needy people who need it. And so some people take that passion that they have, that gift that they have, and turn it around and share it in ways that can help others. Some people volunteer so that they can meet new people, make new friends who share their own interest in talent, their own interest and their own values. And as we used to talk about a lot at the United Way Academy for Volunteerism, volunteering is one of the best ways to not only sharpen your skills, but to get a new job, perhaps even a new career, because you go and you learn something while you're giving, and it's really a cool way to do that. Rob McKenna said, "You can study government and politics in school, but the best way to really understand the process is to volunteer your time." So in other words, get out there and do it. And when you're out there doing it, you're honing your skills, you're learning new stuff, you're meeting new people, and you're also testing out what it would be like if, in fact, you decided to make a career or a job out of whatever you're volunteering for. And also, by the way, people are looking at you, particularly if you're volunteering at an organization where you'd eventually like to work. So there's all kinds of reasons. Everything from helping polish up your resume, to having a commitment to help others, to working somewhere new, developing skills, honing your leadership expertise, giving back, making a difference. There's so much. But I need to tell you that the volunteer world in which I honed my skills has changed dramatically in the last 30 years. Now, has anybody noticed that those candy stripers now wear green or blue gym shoes and slacks? And some are even men. The workplace revolution that created a more strategic, independent employee, choosier in balancing life and career demands, has spilled into the work-for-free realm of volunteering. Volunteers now come with well-defined expectations. They believe their time is valuable, so they typically prefer short-term projects that provide some tangible results that they can see and really kind of take with them and talk about. And they want to spend time having real meaning in their lives, so therefore they want real meaningful volunteer assignments. At one time, the majority of volunteers were stay-at-home moms and retirees. Today's volunteers are teenagers, Gen Xers, professionals, corporate employees, home-based entrepreneurs, community activists, and all personalities in between. And it's through all of their efforts and many, many more that much of the work to help people and improve community life is done. Statistics and research can prove this, but more importantly, I know I see the evidence every day where thousands of people give freely of their time and, yes, even money to help making a difference in the lives of others. A strong volunteer corps across our country is no longer a luxury or a nicety, a nice thing to do. It really is a key to our survival and growth as a nation. So you may be wondering, well, what are the ways that you can volunteer? As I said before, there's so many things you can do. You can go to a senior center. You can coach a local youth team, basketball team, softball team. You can tutor a student, go to a school and volunteer to tutor. You can fix and serve meals. You can, volunteer to do various things at your local school, or you can organize a yard sale for charity. And you can serve on a community board or nonprofit board. It just takes the gamut. The gamut is out there for you. There's all different kinds of things. So if you're looking to volunteer, it's out there for you. Now, if you're already an active volunteer, I'd like you to think about some things to do. Ask others to join you in your volunteer efforts. People respond to people they know. So if you ask somebody, they're more likely to say yes because they know you. You have a relationship. And, you can always tell them about all the excitement and fun and reward that you're getting to convince them to work with you. As Mahatma Gandhi said, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Another thing, if you're already actively volunteering, I'd like you to think about. Talk to teachers and boards of educations and folk who work in schools about making sure in schools there's curriculum and opportunity to learn about volunteering, to do service learning, to really get young people involved in philanthropy. Teaching about volunteering and the different ways to make a difference and give back in schools is one of the best ways to continue the evolution of giving in our country. You should also go on social media to tell about your experiences and ask others to do the same. I'm telling you, when you tweet something or you put a post on Facebook about what a phenomenal experience you had at the soup kitchen and how many meals you served, and even share a story about someone who came up to you and shared with you how much they appreciated you, because that does happen when you're face to face with people and they're just so appreciative of you being there and helping out. Folk will come up and tell you. If you share an experience like that on Facebook and ask your friends to join you in giving back or doing service, you in fact can cause, it's a ripple effect. You will for sure have folk who will join you in volunteering. And then I can't leave this subject of, what to do, particularly if you're an active volunteer already, and that is to consider also giving money. Your treasure. It's time, talent, and treasure. And we know that for people who volunteer, they're more likely to contribute to the cause that they're working with. So I want to put that in there too. And if you say, I'd like to do it, I don't know where to go, you can always Google volunteer opportunities, and there'll be lots of opportunities you'll see about. You can ask in your church, synagogue, or mosque, and I know at those religious organizations, they're also doing lots and lots of things. You can ask at your schools ways that you can help. You can also go to places like Points of Light Hands-On Network. You can Google that. There'll be a host of volunteer opportunities as well as Volunteer Match. And these sites will, you put in your zip code or you talk about the kinds of things you'd like to do in the community, and they'll connect you. So there's lots of resources, and many communities, many states have a community, what's called a Community Services Commission. It's usually at the state level, and these commissions too are just havens of volunteer opportunities, and you can connect with them and be then matched or connected with various opportunities in the community. It's been said that if every American donated 5 hours a week, it would equal the labor of 20 million full-time volunteers. Someone said that. I think it was Whoopi Goldberg who was talking about this whole idea and said this. Can't you imagine the impact that would have in our communities? It would represent a small personal investment with a huge payoff. Now, I want to just close with sharing with you one of my probably most rewarding volunteer experiences. And that was with Governor George Romney, who was the governor of Michigan. This was in the late 80s, early 90s. I was president heading up the United Way here in our community, and I had gotten a phone call. And the phone call was from Governor George Romney, and he said he wanted to come in and talk with me. So I said, okay. Now, this was really a kind of cool thing to get a call from a former governor. He was also secretary of HUD at the national level, well beloved. Governor was one of the founders of New Detroit, this nation's first urban coalition, calling me, saying he wanted to come in and talk with me. And of course I knew him because at the time, one of the things that United Ways across the country sponsored were what was called volunteer action centers. And these centers were places where anything you wanted to do with, know about, learn about volunteerism, they were the places to go. And so, of course, I knew about the governor and his work because he was the one who really organized these volunteer action centers all across the nation. So when he came in, and I'll never forget it, I can see him coming in with a bundle of energy. And, by this time he was in his 80s, maybe 90s. You would never know it because he was a bundle of energy. He came in and he said, I have this idea that if we raise the level and awareness of the importance of volunteering and what it can do in communities and for people, that we could dramatically change the number of people who in fact do volunteer. We can increase the numbers, we can impact more problems, and we can really make a difference in our communities. And he also had this vision that it wouldn't just be people in the nonprofit world or social service agencies. He wanted to pull in corporations, civic leaders, elected officials, and almost pretty much everybody to agree to come around the table and support an idea that we could in fact raise the level of volunteerism in southeastern Michigan. So of course, what was I going to say? But sounds good to me. Let's do it. All my life, I loved volunteering, was grown up with volunteering. Remember I told you about being that candy striper. And then the work that I was doing in heading up United Way, much of it was about volunteerism. So we joined forces, and that began a 3-year movement where the governor and I worked together almost daily on this initiative. We created what we called the Volunteer Leadership Coalition. It reached out to all the key stakeholders that the governor had wanted. We got buy-in and agreement from the elected officials of all of the counties and the mayor of Detroit. We went and brought in key CEOs. We brought in grassroots organizations, community organizations, nonprofits, youth into this volunteer leadership coalition, and we began to implement projects, talk about lots of stuff, and begin to slowly but surely put a shining light on volunteerism and how it could help the community. So after 3 years, we increased the number of people who were doing volunteerism, and on the other side, increase the number of volunteer opportunities where we would have nonprofits and other organizations who were actively involved and engaged in letting the community know the kinds of opportunities that were available. And much of this work was spearheaded and driven through the Volunteer Action Center. So there was actually staff there who were working on this. And we began to change how organizations looked at and dealt with the whole subject of volunteerism and saw it more as a strategic way to make differences in our community. And one of the things that George and I, so you can imagine after, 3 years, he became George. Governor Romney and I coined this phrase, and we would use it every place we went. And it goes like this: money helps, but people solve problems. And what we believed was that, yes, as a United Way organization and as many nonprofits in the community know, we do have to raise money to survive for organizations. You got to pay the bills. But while that helps, the real magic is in bringing people together to solve problems in communities. And that's what volunteering is all about. And that's what the governor and I and many, many, many other people decided to spend a good chunk of our lives making sure that happened. In fact, the night before his death, and I think the governor was around 80, 88 then, he had driven from his home in Bloomfield Hills to Detroit for a dinner with us, the nonpartisan, which we were, Volunteer Leadership Coalition. And it was due to his long advocacy in volunteerism and community involvement that we were able to launch this movement that still continues today. And one of the things he talked about that night was, again, the whole concept, the belief that we had really structured and made real that money helps, but people solve problems. So to those of you who have found a volunteer niche in this world, all I can say is thank you and keep it up. Your selflessness brings an incredible personal and community felt reward. For those of you still searching for the right something to jump into, know that there's a cause everywhere and indeed a need for every cause. Because as Martin Luther King said, everybody can be great because anybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. I and others of us who've been volunteering for a long time would be more than glad to help you find a comfortable spot in the volunteer world. And we won't even make you wear those candy stripes.
You've been listening to Ignite to Impact. Your host is Dr. Geneva Williams, an award-winning executive, facilitator, and master leadership strategist. Dr. Geneva is dedicated to inspiring others to get their leadership on and equipping the next generation with leadership tools and tips to help make the world a better place. Sign up to download Dr. Geneva's mini ebook on leadership. Get the show notes, links, and other resources at drgenevaspeaks.com. That's drgenevaspeaks.com. Thanks for listening. Please share the podcast to those in your community via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Google+, and leave us a 5-star review in iTunes. When you do that, it helps others find the podcast easier. Send your questions or comments to info@drgenevaspeaks.com.